about that. But let's go ahead and give this another shot. So, welcome everybody to the People I Like podcast. This is episode 2. I'm Kenny, your host from Adzuki.com. If you are listening to this on a podcast app, you can also see the visual version of this on youtube.com/Adzuki. You'll see the People I Like podcast playlist. We've already had one episode. The last episode was with my two aunts, Andrea and Sandra Morgan. And today, I bring to you guys a guest that I've known this gentleman for probably close to 23, 25 years, if not a little bit longer. And he is someone that I've looked up to, not from just a mentor standpoint, but also on the music standpoint. We'll get into that a little bit later. I would like to welcome everyone to the show, Mr. Artie Gardella. How you doing, Artie?
Hey, Kenny, I'm doing great.
Now, for everyone that is, everyone that is listening, this is the second time that we've done this because I forgot to actually hit record on the video aspect of this. So, there's a little bit of stuff, but I already got rid of that. So you guys just have to deal with it. Artie, I think we should just jump right in to going into like some, I guess, origin story of Artie. So where were you born?
I was born in Yonkers, New York. Yonkers is a suburb of the city, right? Borders the Bronx. And at one point it was called the City of Gracious Living because everybody who was in the inner city, when they sort of, were ready to move on up, they would move to Yonkers. And that was
Oh,
sort of like the first suburb that you would hit on the mainland. And so it is actually a beautiful city, a big city actually. It's the fifth largest city in the state of New York, and obviously the southern portion of it became a overflow of the Bronx. So there's a lot of inner city going on, and that's where we did the work with the children, where we met you actually.
so Yonkers is essentially like the come up of the city. When you're done with the city and you're ready to start getting, getting a little bit more settled, a little bit more calmed down.
Right.
Yonkers is kind of like the step one.
Yeah, my parents moved here when my father was a professional baseball player for the New York Giants,
I did not know
and
that.
oh yeah, he was a professional baseball player, and it's an actual very interesting story that me and my family are beginning to work on a screenplay,
Nice.
and hopefully a movie. Yeah, because it's an interesting story. He was the first one to really challenge the free agent clause in baseball. In his time, the Latin leagues were offering more money, so he skipped to the Mexican leagues with people like Mel Ott and a number of other pretty famous people, and they were offered more money there, and but it didn't go as they thought. A lot of the Latin leagues were run by gangsters and things like that that offered them the world and then delivered not on as much. So when they tried to come back to the American leagues, they got blackballed. And my father challenged that being blackballed, and he won outside of court. They made a settlement because they didn't want to set a precedent. Happy Chandler, the head of baseball at the time, didn't want to set a precedent because they basically owned the players, and
Wow.
this would challenge that, where they would be able to do what they want, negotiate for the money they want, and all. So he got settled outside of court, and when he part of the deal was to get back onto the major leagues, they would allow him back, but they didn't say how long. So they let him play for one game, then fired him. So
Wow.
yeah, so actually, with the money that he got outside of court, he settled outside of court. They moved to Yonkers. That's where they moved on up, and they got a house there. And he actually got a little restaurant in Getty Square, the inner city there, called Danny's Home Plate. And
Really?
yeah, they had a little restaurant. And the story about that was that everybody loved my mother and her cooking. I mean, she was to know my mother was to love her. She was
Right.
an angel. And my father was sort of a cantankerous, grumpy man. And she went on leave for her second child and had to leave the restaurant. and the restaurant under his hands just fell apart. Nobody wanted to go.
So was it
So
essentially like the original Soup Nazi? Like, was it that level?
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay. Now, what type of food was the restaurant?
It was like a little diner. It was like a
Okay.
little diner in Getty Square. You know, they just served all little, regular diner type of food, hamburger sandwiches and things like that. And yeah,
See,
and so they, so my father, I guess, from for the rest of his life was always, you know, called upon for interviews and the such because it was a pretty important if you follow baseball it's a pretty important part of the history. They call Danny Gardella the Abraham Lincoln of baseball.
really? So yeah, this is
Yeah,
definitely something that that story definitely needs to be told. Because I mean,
yeah,
that I'm just sitting here. I'm like, we're doing the interview with you, but I'm like, tell me more. Because I mean, it's really, really fascinating.
yeah,
I've never heard any of this before, but I mean, it's good to know that history, though.
yeah.
So, all right. So you've just brought back a rush of memories. Getty Square. You used to, whenever we would come up in the summers to Camp Shannon, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. You would take us down to Getty Square, right?
Oh yeah, that was sort of the main area. That was the where all the buses met there, and
Mm-hmm.
you could get any bus to go anywhere in the city. So it was sort of like the Grand Central station of Yonkers there, and all the different marketplaces and all were there, and um, and that's where I actually, as a young man, um, in the church, I began to develop a relationship with people on the streets, helping them out, feeding them, clothing them, and I began an outreach of the church to that part of the city, and eventually, that turned into the Shepherd's Flock, a home for men involved with drugs and alcohol, and the Camp Shannon, the work that we did with inner city kids.
So when did you start Shepherd's Flock? Because I remember the first time actually getting to go up there and meet you, and I think they kind of grandfathered me into being able to go on the New York trip when I think the earliest I went was 13 or 14. I think the limit was supposed to be like
Really, you were that
15.
young?
Yeah, I was really, really young, but I think it was supposed to be like 15, if not 16, but they let me
Yeah,
go in
yeah.
a
Oh,
little
yeah.
earlier.
That's what we wanted. We wanted 15 and up. And how many years did you go?
Oh, I went. Oh man, I did the New York trip probably. I want to say at least 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
What was the New York
Yeah,
trip?
I was thinking that. Yeah,
Because I started out
yeah.
as like a junior counselor, like one that was just like an
Right.
assistant to anyone, and then eventually, I think the last time that I went on the New York trip, that was probably I want to say my junior or senior year of high school. And I remember it was myself, Darren Gerhart, Joe. We called him Marv back in the time. Back then, Marv. We were all the leadership. We had made it to leadership by then,
Right.
and it was that generation
Right.
that was doing the New York trip. But I mean, I was back with when Dina Elworthy and all that age, Doug and Kwame and all them. I was going there, and then I saw the transition, and I watched a lot of those kids grow up, and then a lot of the kids that were in the camp that were only a few years younger than me. By the time I was done, I saw them as starting. Some of them started becoming leadership themselves. So I
Right.
so I thought
Right.
I thought that was really, really cool. But I mean, some of the friendships that I made with your crew up there, Simone, Tracy, Darren, I mean, I met,
Yeah.
yeah, and these are, people that, I mean, I don't keep in touch with them on a regular basis, but still it's nice to see, what they're all doing with their lives. And, occasionally we'll
Yeah.
talk on Facebook and stuff like that. So about what year did you start Shepherd's Flock?
Well, Shepherd's Flock, I was 19 years old, and so I'm 54 now. You could do the math. And I was working on the streets in the Getty Square area, the inner city area of Yonkers. Every Saturday I go down. My mother would bundle me a big pile of clothes and bags, and I would give out clothes, and I would collect a little money from my job at the time, and I would take them out to eat pizza and things like that. And I just year after year, began to develop a relationship with people on the street, homeless people mostly.
Hmm.
And then at about 19 years old, that was from when I was 16, 19 years old, I really wanted to do something. I wanted to take it a step further and really begin to help them out and and see their lives change and recover from their addictions and things like that. So I was going to a church in North Yonkers, and I asked my pastor, I would take the people to the church, and by this time I was driving the church van,
Hmm.
and then after I would bring them to church, I would fill up the van with people from the streets. I would bring them back to park benches and buildings where they would go to the rooftop and sleep. And it would really upset me to go home to my bed at night when all my friends were
Right.
going to the streets. And so I remember asking my pastor, would you be open to them staying in the basement here? We could get some cots. And he said, if you were willing to stay with them and and oversee this program, go on ahead. And so I started that night. I brought the couple of people that went with me to church. I said, would you like to stay here instead of going back to the streets? And that night, about I think 3 people stayed that night. By the end of the week, it was over 20 people, and it never stopped after that. And
Wow.
it went on for years and years. And uh, and then we sort of defined what we were doing from just bringing people in off the streets to really working specifically with men who were involved with drugs and alcohol, because that was the biggest population out there.
Right.
And so we developed a curriculum, and we worked with the Teen Challenge Training Center in Rardsburg, Pennsylvania, as a second phase. So we were considered a crisis center where we would take them off the street, get them together, get them, to be freed from their, detoxed,
Uh-huh.
and uh, and get themselves some stability
Some
for about three
self-sufficiency.
or four months. Yeah, getting them, they work around the church. Everybody would have a job to support the program, and we'd have times, where we would have group therapy. I had professional, therapists come in and meet with them one on one, and then we would have the curriculum, the classes, which basically taught them, issues of mental health, of how to sort of cope with life.
Right.
And after 3 or 4 months with us, then they move on to another 6 to 8 months in Rardsburg, Pennsylvania, and then where they would go on, they could get their GED there. They could get a training
I didn't know there was
in
a
different
satellite
types of.
program with this.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's different types of trades and things like that.
Oh,
Now
wow.
that wasn't our program. We worked in collaboration with them, and then they would send them back to us to re-enter them back into society. And so we would have like a halfway house type living situation for them, where they would have to get a job. They would have to, they had some perimeters, and many of them ended up working with the program of the first phase program as counselors and workers. And eventually, the whole program was taken over by graduates
Really?
and went on for years for years in the hands of probably about 3 or 4 different graduates took it at one point or another,
Hmm.
and carried it on for another about 25 years. And uh, and so that's been actually going on to just this last year. I heard that the program finally came to an end, where they were the church that was involved is selling the building, and the program is officially gone. But hundreds of lives helped, and I'm still in touch with many of those men today, and it's just awesome stories. And many of them became drug alcohol counselors
Wow.
in facilities, and all sorts of different things. They successful lives.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it. I mean, it's 2019 now. You started when you were 19, and you said you're 54 now,
Yeah.
and the program just came to an end. So from, you
So how
know,
many years is
y-
that?
that's like way too much math for me to try to do in just one sitting. But I mean, if you're thinking about it right now, so So I'm gonna say here. I do have a computer in front of me, so that so that works.
This
But
is Saturday. I don't want my brain to work that hard on Saturday.
exactly. So 35 years. So the program
Wow.
went
Yeah.
for
So it went
35
ran
years.
about 35 years. Shortly after, we actually we were started in the church in another side of Yonkers, so I would bus them over to North Yonkers, which was more of a uh, very much a suburban area, whereas is they lived in the inner city of Yonkers, or they came from the inner city of Yonkers, and the city brought us to court because they wanted it. They felt it wasn't legally zoned, but we declared as a church we're able to do all the missions of a church wherever a church is zoned. So
Right.
that's feeding, that's taking in the homeless and stuff like that. So we actually won in court. We had to go to court for years that they were coming against us. But it brought a lot of attention to us, a lot of support. We actually developed our whole support base through the controversy of the city trying to get us out of there.
It doesn't make any
And
sense to me because it's like the city's like, don't help people. you know,
yeah, yeah.
it
Well,
doesn't.
the neighborhood wanted us out because they felt like this element was coming into their neighborhood, and they didn't want that. So they fought it hard. They pressed the city hard. The city actually really wasn't against it as much as the neighborhood really pressed the city to enforce their zoning laws. And but the other thing that came out of it, a little Italian pastor was retiring and moving to Florida actually,
Hmm.
and his congregation was an old congregation ready to they were dwindled down to a handful of people.
Hmm.
So they had this beautiful building on Locust Hill in the middle of the
Locust
inner
Hill.
city, and he was ready to retire. So he came to me one day and said, "Hey," he said, "you need a building. You need to get out of this neighborhood here. I have a building in the inner city. I give it to you." And what he did is paid because it was a nonprofit organization and he was retiring. No one could keep the money that they had in the bank. So he paid for our first year of bills, all the
Whoa.
utilities and everything until their bank account ran out. So we had a free ride, a beautiful facility in the middle of the inner city. It was the first mayor of Yonkers House actually, and that was the facility that you came to on 57 Locust Hill, right across from the big tower, 77 Locust Hill.
Yeah.
And so did our men's home in there. Me and my wife at the time lived upstairs in an apartment, and I ran the program, and it was a wonderful facility. We it had a lot of land on it too. We built a beautiful garden,
Hmm.
which I never able to. I mean, here in Florida, I was never able to produce a garden like I produced in the inner city, in the ghetto of Yonkers. I produced the most beautiful garden. I mean, all our vegetables from the program came from that garden. We'd go out and pick our whole salad for the night, and string beans and radishes
Nice.
and every tomatoes, every kind of lettuce you can imagine.
You left your
It
green
was
thumb in New
just oh,
York.
yeah. So all the men would work in the garden. Everybody had a duty to keep the house going, and that's where, in that facility, I began to meet the children of the future Camp Shannon.
Which is where I wanted to go to next. What year did you start Camp Shannon?
Well, so I go by how old I was. so at this point, I'm about 23 years old,
Oh, so
and moved.
not too long after then.
No, that's right. So now we're moved into this facility, 57 Locust Hill, and there was a bunch of kids always playing on our property, running through our property. They actually used which it was actually an old horse stable that was converted into a somewhat of a garage shed, and they had their clubhouse in there, unbeknownst to us. So
Okay.
they'd sneak in there. We'd find everything moved around, and and so one day I called them and I said, "Hey, get on over here," and sat him on our stoop, and we began to talk. And they said, "We don't have anything to do here in the neighborhood. We like, this is that's our clubhouse. We'd hate to lose it, and this and that."
Hmm.
So I began to do programs with them. So one of the first things I did was, I think the first program we did was Fridays with Jesus, we called it. So
Okay.
after school on Friday, we'd bus them all over to our church, and we'd have all these big, uh, you know, uh, just pots of food for them, and that the mothers of the church when I say the mothers of the church. Now these were
Yes.
all the inner city churches,
Hmm.
and the mothers of the church would cook and hug. That was their job. They would cook for the kids, and then they would line them up and hug the kids.
Well, see, the
And
thing.
I would give them a basic, like a Sunday school type lesson on Friday, like
Uh-huh.
about the Bible, and then we'd have crazy games and contests and stuff, and then bus them back home. And that turned into an everyday after school program, which turned into a full fledged summer program, year round program that involved everything from a summer day camp to half of the summer, and then it turned into an overnight camp Upper Westchester
Hmm.
for the other half of the summer, which you were involved with that too.
Yep.
And we basically got staff to run the whole summer program from all around the world. We had youth groups coming in from your youth group from Florida, uh,
Ireland, I
North
remember.
Carolina, Georgia, Vermont, Massachusetts, and then actually youth groups from England and Ireland and Holland, and would come a week at a time and serve the children and produce a theme for them,
Right.
like a vacation Bible school theme for the
Hmm.
week, whatever their theme that they brought, and would do fun contests and things like that. And that became our program. We had after school homework help for them. We call it the study zone, where they would have to study
Right.
when they got out of school, and then if they studied for about an hour, then we'd open up the whole community room in that big high rise across the street.
I
They gave us
remember.
their community room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'd have games and all sorts of fun things going on, and we had a basketball team, and I was the manager of the team. I knew nothing about basketball. Had a whole clipboard
You just got
and
to
blow a
yeah,
whistle.
clipboard and whistle. That's all you need. I mean, that's like that's the starter kit. Okay, so I do have a
Yeah,
question. Well, before I have before I ask the question, you mentioned the moms of the church, cooking, and their jobs were cooking and hugging the kids. A lot of these kids, because I mean, and I remember a lot of these kids, they didn't have that at home. They didn't have
right.
that connection with a parent that was going to be able to nurture and whatnot. So being able to get in and get that contact and get their bellies full, that was
Right.
obviously like a big thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that a lot of those kids, they still remember those moments to this day as one of the highlights of their
Yeah.
childhood.
They would call the feeling they got at our programs the God feeling,
Hmm.
and what that God feeling is basically love.
Right. And actually, I remember a lot of them saying that. And now you said that you had people coming from all over. I remember there was the last 2 years that I was there. Some of the Ireland crew were held over, and they were staying there and helping out a little bit extra. How did you get in contact with all the different places from across the country and then across the world?
Well, I at this point, in my young 20s, I was a preacher, and I was involved not just inside the church working and doing these programs as parachurch programs, but I would travel around the world and minister on young people and hold youth rallies around the world. I did it in, everywhere from Ireland to England and Holland, and we even went to Israel and then all across the United States. And many times I would even bring the young people to different areas
Really?
to share their testimony. And yeah, so we developed a relationship with the body of Christ worldwide, and they knew what we were doing and offered us help. And we had a nice defined program where I knew exactly how they could help.
Right.
Get a team together, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to do.
Right.
You're going to produce a theme for the week and teach it and do skits and crazy contests. And then you're going to be these kids' big brothers and sisters all week long with buddy checks,
Buddy
megaphone
checks.
buddy checks, and
Yes.
everything.
Oh, wow. You just brought back so many memories with
Buddy checks
buddy checks at the
in the pool.
pool. Where was that at?
Mountain Lakes. It was
Yes.
Mountain Lakes and Bear Mountain, the Bear
Bear
Mountain
Mountain. Bear
pool.
Mountain was the one that I remember. I
Yeah, we
remember.
would take them on trips twice a week.
Yes, and that was always. I mean, honestly, for every year from when I was a kid, or early teen, all the way through till my last year there, that I will say, yeah, it was for the kids, but the trips to Bear Mountain were one of my favorite highlights of the New York trip. It's like we're going, oh yeah, except for the days that it would rain. Um, but I remember, and again, so actually, I do have a question. So people like, and I'm naming names of people that are listening to the podcast. Unless they were there, they're not going to know who I'm talking about. But like Darren, Tracy, Simone, Dwayne, were they in the program, Camp Shannon program as kids, and then grew up to be?
Yeah, that was the first crew of kids, and they were all between the ages of 7 and 12 years old.
Oh wow.
Maybe 13 was the oldest. So I think Simone and Tracy and Darren were the oldest, and Horace and all of Horace's sisters, Stacy, Katie Ann, Rocky, and then there was all the Yasmin, Latanya,
You're
Valerie,
naming
and
all these names that are
yeah,
just like memory, 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 just
yeah.
coming all to
And
the
then so
surface.
they went from yeah, so that was our first crew, and then 5 years into the program, now they're young adults and older teenagers, and they became the workers and the leaders
Hmm.
of the program, and eventually, even when I left, Simone actually took over the Camp Shannon and ran it with Darren for a couple
Nice.
of years.
Right on.
Yeah, yeah,
I see Simone on Facebook every once in a while. And see, all the big things she's doing. Going and playing in Sister Act, and I
yeah,
mean, she's really Shout out to you, Simone, if you ever watch this or listen to it. But
yeah.
I remember going up and. There was a lot of camaraderie from our youth group with your crew. Sometimes a little bit of a rivalry, a little bit, here and there. But
Yeah.
but I do remember you had everything. I mean, even from when I was 13, seeing how you had everything set up, it was just this well-oiled machine. It was, and without, without even blinking, if something was happening, you immediately, either you or your leadership, with that first crew, they knew exactly what to do. There was no, so what do we do in this situation? You guys had it all laid out. Like now, when we started coming up, our youth group, how many years had you had that been going on?
We started bringing groups in to help us probably two years into the program.
Okay.
We realized we needed more help, and that's when all these relationships I had, reached out to us, or I'd reach out to them and say, "Hey, you want something fun for your youth group to do over the summer? Give us a week, and it'll change their lives." And you saw the impact that it made on you.
Oh
So
yeah.
not only these kids were blessed, but all these youth groups that came in got to experience, real, servanthood and working with children who were very grateful and developed, as a result, lifelong friendships and, like you said, relationships developed, and so it was really a beautiful thing, and it was bigger than me or even our immediate staff. It was a real, it was a real. I feel it was a real move of God that was working there in Yonkers amongst these kids. It was hundreds and hundreds of children. I mean, when we talk about it with the kids, it's like just about every kid at that time from Yonkers, you know, had a brother, a sister, or a cousin in the program,
Right.
or themselves. And so it was just really a beautiful thing, and it was bigger than us. It was really bigger than
Well,
us.
there were so many seeds that were planted that have, kind of just shot off into so many different directions that they're taking that legacy with them out into the world. And
One of the greatest just recently that just blessed my heart so much is Dwayne Palmer. He's a principal of a school now,
wait, wait, wait,
and
wait, 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 wait. What? Dwayne's a
he
principal?
just became yep, he just became the principal of one of the charter schools, the finest charter schools in the city of Yonkers. He's their principal, and
Big ups to Dwayne, man.
oh yeah, yeah, and so he's been a teacher for years now. Many of them actually are teachers. Simone, she's a teacher.
Did not know that.
Eh, oh yeah, many of them became teachers, and so that's a wonderful thing too. That the legacy does continue.
Well, see,
Working with children.
I remember, I had mentioned rivalries for a while. It was like people were trying to pit Dwayne and I against each other since we were both drummers, and we were both right around the same age, so, and it was
Yeah,
just like, we would have, it, we would bring a setup with us, but you guys had a drum set there as well, and I would get on and I would play a little bit, then hop off the drum set, and then he would get on and play a little bit, and it's like, well, no, he's not going to warm me up. Then I would get down, and I would play a little bit, in the off times and whatnot. But again, I remember, I mean, because there was also some times when I came up, I think I came up for Christmas as well. And we spent like the day after Christmas, we were up there for like maybe 3 or 4 days. And I remember that, my mind works in weird ways, and I remember certain little uh, pinpointed things. I remember it was snowing really, really hard right outside of your house, and we were walking to your house. I can't remember. I think we were walking from the apartment that was right across where Simone and Dwayne and everyone lived, because we were just
Right.
visiting with them. So we were walking across, but I just remember that going up to for the New York trips, it was always something that we look forward to for the summers, just because of the memories that yes, we were able to affect change, but we also we developed a lot of memories during those trips. I mean,
Yeah.
my best friend Darren and I, we talk about. Um, you had one guy working for you, um, that was doing he did the AV, he did the audio visual, working the soundboard, whatnot. I can't remember his name, but all I remember is every time we were going to go do a setup, he would just come up to us. He was like, can you believe how much this stuff is made up with wires? He would just say wires over and over and over again. I don't know why, but and that was just something that Darren and I will constantly say to each other. It's like, yeah. So I just need to go pick up this new machine, and I need to go get the cabling. He's like, there's so many wires. So it's just like, again, all these little memories that we have from back then. I mean, I've found pictures from the New York trips. So I mean, that is something that I know you said it's bigger than you, bigger than anyone really, but I mean that is something that you planted that seed and was able to really make that grow. So I mean there's several lives that were touched and probably subsequently touched from other people, based on starting that. So I mean, in my opinion, that is something that's absolutely amazing. Um, so with that, when did you move away from Yonkers?
Um, okay, so I went on, this whole season of my life working with the children, and then they were young adults now. The first crew of them, the camp's still going on, and I felt like I needed to start a church. Now I was a minister, but sort of a grassroots street, mercy ministry type of, working with inner city kids. And I felt like I needed to be a pastor to these young adults who are now getting married, coming out of college or getting married, having children, and I felt like I wanted to provide a family, church,
Hmm.
and be a pastor to them. So I merged with an existing church in the city of Yonkers, right down, in where I like to be, the inner city of Yonkers.
Hmm.
We took over a huge building. We took over a huge project where I was responsible for a lot of finances to raise up to keep that building. And I guess everything went in double time
Mm.
from there. Like it sped up, and I gave over the men's program to a graduate, so they were running that. I was still living in the facility though, the men's home up above, in the apartment. Then the children's program was going strong.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of stuff happening with that still. Although a lot of the young people were taking over that, I was still involved. And then I was trying to run this church, and I guess that's where probably I made a big mistake. My pastor, my pastor to this day, I call him my pastor, Pastor John, um, always said, that was where you went off. And he felt I just should have stayed under him as, a minister, and I didn't need to have my own church, and things were going good, because that's where things really began to press me hard, and I guess I became overwhelmed. Now, I always struggled with mental illness. As a teenager, I went through a lot of depression problems, and
Hmm.
in those days, you sort of just you didn't know what it was. You had the blues basically,
Right.
but it was full on depression. I had I was more blue than your average person that was just down. yeah, down and out. I mean, I went through a lot of struggles, and then
Right.
as a I guess a young adult, about 21 years old, it hit me again,
Mm.
and left, and then at 35, it came on strong. I went into a depression and broke, I guess, emotionally. I had a breakdown that I just could not get out of.
Mm.
And at that point, as a Christian, many times when you go through the, they don't want to, you know, they don't want to go to the secular society for our mental health. So it's basically you just pray about it,
Right.
and pray about it, and God will get you through this. And hey, I prayed, I fasted, I chased the devil, I did everything I could do, but I couldn't shake this depression that I was in.
Mm.
And one pastor told me, I went to a doctor and I talked to him about this, and he said I had depression. He gave me some medicine, and I was good, And so I went to my general practitioner, and basically he just gave me an antidepressant, not knowing that I was bipolar. And
Mm.
so when you give someone just the antidepressant to bring you up, if you're bipolar, you keep going up. So I went into an all out spin out of control with this
Oh
medicine,
wow.
and I was shooting through the roof in a manic state, doing things I never should have done as a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I started going out and partying again, and drinking, and just it was just not. I mean, this was not me. This was
Right.
not what I do. And I just was spiraling downhill into this person that wasn't me, and eventually, I had to leave the ministry because my life got out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up in a psych ward for about a month in one, and then they
Really.
sent me to a yeah, and then they sent me to another place, a follow up place. They didn't even want to let me go until I had a follow up place, which was this specialty place in Texas that dealt with bipolar, and the guy there was supposed to be really good with the psychiatrist. Getting the right prescription of to deal with the high and the low, which is the challenge for a person with bipolar.
Right.
How do you bring up the low without getting them too high? How do you bring them down from the high without getting them too low?
Finding that
So a
balance.
lot of experiments are done on people at the time. A lot of experiments were done on me with medicine combinations, and things weren't going good. It was making me
Oh.
crazier. When I went to Texas, I was on a slew of medicine from New York,
Uh huh.
the doctors there, and the doctor in Texas said, and this was a weekday program where you would go in the morning, leave at night, therapy, all this stuff, but you stayed where, hotel or whatever
Right.
for the weekend and night. So I got there on a Friday, met the doctor. He gave me some prescriptions. He said, "Don't stop the New York stuff. I'll wean you off of that, but start taking it." So now I'm taking two doctors' different regimens of medicine, probably about 7, 8 pills in all. Right?
Oh.
I went crazy that weekend, and I went out of control. I had a psychotic episode, um, where the police had to hunt me down and Baker Act me, and I ended up in a psych ward
Oh man.
in Texas. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
I went into a psych ward.
with all that medication, I mean, that's going to throw the chemical imbalance like way out of skew.
Right,
Oh my
and,
goodness.
and and you're not making right decisions. And there was free cocktails on my hotel floor,
Oh
so
no.
so I went out and took advantage of those free cocktails. So that added to the whole mixture.
Right.
And needless to say, I went berserk and ended up in a hospital there.
Oh man.
And yeah, and so now I'm in Texas. I ended up leaving the program there early with a girl who was getting discharged. I said, "Can I stay at your place?" We made friends, and I didn't tell anyone in New York where I was. Now I'm out of my mind at this point.
Right.
Literally out of my mind.
Hmm.
No stability whatsoever, crying all the time, manic like crazy. So I didn't. I chose not to tell anywhere where I wanted to disappear for a while, and so I stayed at this house there, and nobody knew. My wife, my children, nobody knew where I was for over a month,
Oh wow.
and so And so what happened was, and I don't know if you know this story with Brock Atkins, but what happened was my wife went to my brother-in-law who knew how to hunt down people for debts. He worked for a debt collector, and
Oh,
so
okay.
somehow, I guess I used a credit card or something, but somehow they found where I was living,
Wow.
and one night Brock Atkins comes to the door. So my wife Lisa tells Brock, "Hey, I don't know who else to turn to. You're his buddy. Can you go and get him and retrieve him back to Florida?" At the time, they were living in Florida. Now
Right.
they moved to Florida because they had to leave the ministry, and so Brock comes, knocks on the door, boom, boom, boom. Artie, I know you're in there.
Oh.
Answer the door. So I go to this girl. I peek out the window. Oh my God, that's a pastor friend of mine, Brock Atkins. And how did he get here? I didn't say a word. So for about 2 or 3 hours, he's getting louder and louder on that door. He tries to
Oh.
go get the police, and the police say, we can't do anything. He didn't do anything illegal.
Right.
We can't do anything. So he comes back probably about 10 or 11 at night, and he says, Artie, I'm going to knock on the door for the last time. If you don't come out, I'll be at the airport with a ticket for you tomorrow at the airport and waiting for you at 10 o'clock.
Hmm.
And so he left. And don't that next morning I got up and I felt like this is what I had to do. And so I got a ride to the airport, and Brock saw me there, gave me a big old hug, got me on the plane, and sent me to now Arizona to my sister there to just sort of have a chill out time.
Right.
And from that point, in Arizona, I went back to Florida, and my life began to very, very little at a time uh, uh, get back together. But it took years to get my life stable again.
Well, as someone that has struggled with, mental health as well, I've gone through several bouts of depression and dealing with, you know, facing seemingly obstacles that you couldn't really overcome, and at points in time you're just sitting, you're like you don't know what you're going to do, and again, you get the stigma, not just from a Christian standpoint, but you also get the stigma as a man.
Yeah, just from anybody.
You're,
Yeah,
you're supposed to be this pillar of stability and be able to handle
right,
your business, and if you don't, it's
right.
just like a lot of times we end up getting shunned, or at least we feel
Yeah,
like we're going to get shunned when really that's not going to be the case. So with all
yeah.
of that.
Imagine going to your job and saying, I'm going through I have a flu. I got to take a couple of days off. I have the flu. Oh, no problem, right? I mean, that everybody does that. Imagine going saying, I'm mentally ill. I have a mental illness, and I have to take a few days just to chill out. And people don't understand that, and
Right.
there's still a stigma with that. And now you'll be looked down upon at the job as someone who's not stable enough to handle that job, perhaps.
Right.
It's a sickness, just like any other sickness. It's like diabetes. It's like any kind of sickness that someone would get. It's a sickness of the mind, mental illness, and that's why I'm really glad for a lot of these. A couple of days ago was World Mental Health Day,
Yep.
just to get conversation going. That hey, it's okay to be not okay, and if you have a mental illness, there's no stigma with that. Just like there's no stigma for someone who has diabetes
Right.
or cancer or anything else. And you can recover from it also, just like anyone else come with the proper, whether it's medicine or. And now I'm not doing a medicine regime, and basically I got back to health, and that's how I got myself back together, getting back to eating right and exercising, and I went on a whole kick of just naturally getting myself back together.
Right. Now, I mean that is something that I am grateful for the time that we live in now, because if you go back to the 40s, 50s, it's like, oh, he's going out of his mind here. Let me get this sharp instrument and put it next to his eye, right to his brain, and we'll just
Yeah,
clip that
yeah,
right there. And see,
yeah,
look, he's catatonic now. He's fine. He's fine. We've gone from
isn't that
Terminator
crazy?
2, razor in the eye, now to being able to actually be able to talk about it and acknowledge that it's
Yeah,
something that people really,
yeah,
really do go through. So with you moving to Florida, and you're out of the ministry now. When did you start the Synergy Senior exercise?
Yeah, so I started exercise, getting back into exercise. I told you my father was a professional baseball player, so
Hmm.
he always put us in sort of exercise regimens. We had 9 kids in the family, and so we were like,
Whoa!
he had weight, yeah, and so he had weights in the backyard, and he would be walking on his hands, and we would try to walk on our hands and doing pull-ups off the swing, and so he always had us doing. And my mother was a health nut before that was a fashionable thing. You know, there hardly was even a health food store. I think there was one, and we would travel to it. And health food back then wasn't like it is now. I mean, you ate health bread back then. It was like eating tree bark. And yeah, so we were health nuts, way back then. So what I basically did is I knew I know the power of food. My mother taught me that the power of eating right and
Hmm.
taking care of your body. So I began to eat right again. I lost probably about 40 pounds of just, not taking care of myself pounds.
Hmm.
Um, I got back into running, and that definitely stirs up endorphins, in your body and serotonin and I got back in the gym, working out regularly, getting so excited about feeling better and becoming stable. I started getting certified in these different classes that I was taking
Hmm.
and began to teach. And then eventually developed a whole career out of it, where now I work full time working with. I went from regular fitness working with everybody. Now I specifically work with seniors, Synergy Senior Fitness, and I work with people 65 and older, and I help them in their golden years to be the best that they could possibly be, so they could do everything that they want to do on their bucket list for as long as they possibly could do it.
Oh,
That's my
I, I
challenge to them.
I love
Yeah, and
that.
we exercise, and I have a great business. I travel within 2 counties. I have about 10 different sites that I work at, all my own classes, and
Wow.
and we have seniors coming into these classes learning everything from balance. We work coordination, quick response, so they could drive and be out there and respond to the quick traffic.
Nice.
Balance is an issue because people falling over 65 is a problem,
Hmm.
in healthcare. And so we try to keep people from falling and teach them balance. And of course, the regular light weights, dumbbells, bands, stretchy bands, cardio. And so I'm at it every day. That's what I do now. And so I basically turned the exercise that was for my own mental health. I turned it into a career.
So you essentially went from, um, you know, reinforcing and nurturing and training up people's, spiritual well-being, going through your own fight, and then switching over to nurturing and bringing up people's physical well-being.
Physical bodies. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's really, I hate to be cliche-ish, but it's really a Phoenix Rising type of situation. You went through, and you had this nice rise up. You went through a little bit, well, more than a little bit, like a big fire. You were forged in that fire, and then you rose up from the ashes, became something completely and totally different. I remember when my wife and I, we were still relatively newlyweds, and I found out you were in town, and I was like, hey, I was like, I reached out to you. I think that was on MySpace, to tell you how far back that was, and and it was, hey, do you want to meet up? I heard you in town, and you're like, yeah. So we went over to, again, Olive Garden, I think in Ormond Beach, and we just sat and talked for a while. And I remember seeing you for the first time. Now, growing up, I remember you being really clean cut. Not really in suits all that much, but just really, really clean cut, a little bit more reserved. When you came in, you had, I think it may have been a fresh tattoo. You had an earring, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" I was like, "Wait, what? This is an Artie?" And again, just real laid back, real chill. And you had mentioned that you had gone through some stuff, and we talked for a little bit. Then you lent me your Roland V series drums for a bit. I was again living in an apartment in Daytona Beach, and we kept in contact for a little bit. There was bit of a lull in contact, and then we reconnected on Facebook. And it's just I always remember that you just had this, and still have to this day, just this humongous heart, and just the way you carry yourself has always, I've always admired that. I'll see on Facebook pictures of you, that you're posting for your classes, and you'll get dressed up in all these get-ups, and you get like this silly, crazy look on your face, like and I'm sure that makes your students in your classes,
Oh yeah,
they absolutely.
I give him a little. I give him a little Camp Shannon.
Exactly. That's the actual feeling that I get from seeing those pictures, and it's just always a joy to be around. And I see you also. You have two kids, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so I've
my
seen
daughter Liana.
I've seen
Yeah,
pictures of you and Liana at Times Square during. You guys went during
yeah.
Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was a tradition that we were doing every year, going to the Macy Day Parade when she lived actually right near there.
Okay,
She lives in Brooklyn. She lives in Brooklyn now, so it's not as easy to get to the parade. But yeah, I would visit every Thanksgiving and go there. And she's working in acting, and
I
she went to
saw.
Pace University, and she actually found a little niche in the theater world of stage combat, and it's sort of amazing, and
Really?
I love to see how young adults find their way. Now, when she was a kid, she did taekwondo, yeah,
Hmm.
and by 13 years old, she's becoming a little lady now. Dad, I don't want to get hit in the face anymore, and so no worries, you can let it go, no problem. I was really into it. She was rising up. She was near, I think she was actually the first level of a black belt or right before it, and
Nice.
and then she let it go for years. And then she got involved in theater and high school, and then wanted to study that as a career. And she went to Pace University, their acting school. And now all of a sudden, she's meeting people who are in this what's called stage combat, where they do training to train people for fight scenes, both on stage and in film.
Nice.
And so now she's certified, and she's getting really doing a lot of training and assisting this group that is one of probably the most prominent group in all of New York City that does stage comedy. She has gigs regularly now where
Wow.
she trains theater people and film people of how to fight, basically. So it's amazing. It sort of came back from her taekwondo day. I
Right.
say, does taekwondo, did that help? She said, oh, absolutely. A lot of the stuff that I do is involves those forms and things like that. So it's pretty amazing, where she's going in direction of theater, but this little niche comes up, and
Hmm.
she's finding a whole career in this niche
So,
now.
so I'm
And
gonna need
so
to add.
and then my son and then my son got involved in music,
Hmm.
and he's currently right now in three very popular bands.
Three.
Um,
I
uh,
only heard about the
yeah,
Ned.
yeah, the Ned was his first band, and that's going strong still to this day, 5 years later, and
Nice.
they've done well. They've done three East Coast tours up to New York. They have four releases, four albums they made. They're working on a fifth one now, and they have charted on college radio stations all throughout the nation,
Nice.
and so they've been doing really well. And then he got involved in two other bands locally here, who are also really active, doing a lot. So he's full on into his music, and what I did is I got involved with him first, getting involved in his music career and helping him to and his band to get set up in, sort of a semi managerial type of position. And then we
Clipboard
developed that. It
whistle.
was actually yeah, yeah, exactly. And so now it's actually Rugrat Records, and so Rugrat
Nice.
Records is basically all of the young people and their bands, and we help them out to get exposure. Basically, that's what we're not a record label in a traditional sense of signing and things like that.
Right.
Basically, we're more of a music community that gives support in any way we could give, whether it's fixing an instrument. I fix guitars and things like that for
Hmm.
them. Uh, I've gotten some young people to get voice lessons or lessons on their instruments, and helping them to get in the beginning to get gigs. And now they're on a flow with that. They don't
Nice.
need me anymore. We set up stages where all of these bands could come perform in different festivals,
Hmm.
and I do reviews. So if a young person, if one of their bands does just releases an album or a video or a single, I'll give a review and get that on Facebook. And so it's just, we basically help them to get their music heard.
Nice, right on. So, I mean, now, what does what instrument does your son play?
My son plays the drums. He also fiddles with the guitar. Yeah, yeah, he's a
Yes.
drummer. That's his main instrument, and but he'll pop up to play a few songs with the net, especially,
Hmm.
and he'll take the front and play guitar
Nice.
and sing also. So he's very involved. He's so creative. I mean, these kids pop out new songs every week. On Saturdays they practice. I was just over there today, and there's always a new song popping up, and it's just amazing to see them
I,
and their friends, who are artists too, design artists.
right.
We're getting them involved too, where they'll do live art while uh, while the bands play on our stages. On the side, we'll have a side stage for an artist who will be drawing while the band is playing,
That's
and
cool.
so painting, and so we're trying to promote all of the arts.
And you are now playing again as well, right? I see pictures of you, practicing music and whatnot.
Yeah,
Where are
I
you
took
playing
back
now?
the drum. I got back on the drums after many, many years, and I'm in the Palm Coast Community Concert Band, where basically
Nice.
you have to read, and I haven't read music since I was in high school,
Right.
and and so it was a challenge, but I wanted that challenge in my life, because I mean these kind of things keep you sharp in your head and things
Yeah.
like that. So I'm sight reading music again, and
And as you can see
yeah,
behind
yeah,
me,
exactly.
I have my.
I
I mean, it's a
I
small
still have my
setup,
rolling pin.
but yeah. So I got this Roland set. We were at a pawn shop, my wife and I, and um, I walked in. We were just looking out for some games for the kids, and I look over and I see this set sitting over there, and I'm just like, that's nice, And look at the price, and it was like $3.99. But the guy's like, I'll give you two. He goes, I'll give it to you for $2.99. I was like, say what? He goes, so he's like, yeah, $2.99. And I was like, I don't got that type of money on me right now. And he goes, well, if you can put 10% down, you can make payments on it. And I was like, done. And I slapped him the money. He did that. He threw in this really 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 nice rock and sock throne that has like this nice velvet seat on it. Things incredibly comfortable. So here, I've started, trying to get into making my own music, and I'm not a composer whatsoever, but I'm just sitting here, got a MIDI keyboard. I'm sitting here just trying to, tinker around. And Darren and we had this idea years and years ago because he plays bass. We were like, we should make our own band, whenever we have some time, you lay down some bass tracks and send them down to me, and I'll, lay down drum tracks to it, and we'll call ourselves a band apart, since we can do it everything all digitally. But and that was like 8 years ago when we came up with
That's
that
great.
idea. We've never done it. But so that's my setup. But I remember that set that you're showing right now.
Yeah, there's that set there. And actually, my son is about to move into his own house, and it's a duplex. So he said, Dad, you're using that digital set because I don't think regular drums there. So he's going to be taking that set there, and I have this little cute kit right here. It's a
Oh,
bop kit. This is
nice.
it's a 18-inch bass drum, and this thing goes with me to the different concerts that I perform in. It's so small; it fits in the whole set fits in my trunk,
Nice.
and I'm getting older, so it's hard for me to lift the big sets and stuff like that. This great little set here is what I jam on every day,
Nice.
and we're uh, we're in preparation now for a Veterans Day show. So you have all of these marching band songs, marches for the armed forces, and a Christmas show. So we have all the Christmas shows.
I
A
saw
lot
White
of reading to do
I saw White
there.
Christmas on the music stand, and you know it's you know me. Our family is huge into Christmas. My wife and I we came up with a concept for a Christmas podcast last year. We named it, started getting everything all ready to go. She got a little bit under the weather, so we postponed it. But we just made all the plans to kick off that show called Hot Chocolate and Snowflakes, which is our Christmas movie. Well, just Christmas themed, mainly Christmas movies, but we'll be talking about you know, like Christmas recipes and stuff like that, music, the whole nine. And that should be kicking off. I think we're going to start recording either this week or next. So that one's coming up soon. So people stay tuned for that too.
Oh,
But you know, it's I have not played with a group probably since I'd say 1999. 1999 was probably the last time that I actually had a chance to play. And I miss it. I miss playing a
yeah,
lot. But so what I'll do now is I'll just hook my phone up with Spotify to this set, and I'll just essentially just track.
played
You
it.
know, I'll play the music, and that gives me life. You know, it's just nice to be able to really, especially if you have a song that's hitting really, really, really hard, and you can just just from
Play
muscle
it.
memory of playing it, it's just I absolutely love it. But
Yeah.
you know, it's your story. Like I said, your story has been. I learned a lot already, you know, from this conversation, you know, stuff that I didn't know about. But you know, your life has had a lot of ups and downs, and it's got you to the place that you are today. You know, it's always a journey. It's something that is, I think it can help a lot of people, you know, especially if they feel that they don't have um, well, no, not necessarily that they don't have, but more so if they feel that obstacles are too much to overcome.
Yeah.
You know, that they can really see that. Look, you know, you may be going through something that may seem almost uh, completely and totally impossible to face, but you still can
Right.
get through it and move forward and have an incredibly fruitful life. You have a story that you can tell people. You know that there's several. And again, you just mentioned about it being a mental health awareness day the other day. You know, I
Right.
have a couple of friends that have committed suicide. I've thought about it at you know, more than one time in my life. And you know, it's just having, you know, I'm going to put the, you know, the suicide prevention number and all that stuff on this episode as
Okay.
well, because people need to know that there are people that will listen, genuinely listen, and not think that
Yeah.
they're crazy.
Exactly. And also people need to know that they're not alone in this. There's so many people, more than they can imagine, more
Hmm.
than we can imagine, people who struggle. One out of four people struggle with thoughts of suicide
Hmm.
and and mental illness. And so and you know, and I struggled. That's how I ended up in the hospital the first time. You know, that's the journey that I was. That's you know, the path I was going down.
Hmm.
And and people need to know that not only are they not alone, but there's so much hope. I
Yeah.
mean, no matter what they're going through, you know, you can make it out. If you want to make it out, you can make it out of your situation. Um, the the you know, talking to people about it. There's medicine, you know, that is so much more improved than when I, you know, first started taking medicines. Now they have, even for bipolar, one pill that takes care of it all, you
Really.
know. And I, yeah, the highs and the lows. I mean, medicine has gotten better, therapy has gotten better, and just the fact that we could talk about it and there's understanding makes people feel better. That, hey, I'm not, you know, I'm not, you know, just, you know, silent. I don't have to suffer in silence in this.
Exactly.
There's so many people that are going through the same thing or know somebody who's going through the same thing. And so, so yeah, we want to really put out that message, even through Rugrat Records. That's one of our big messages. One of the young people actually threw himself off of a bridge about 3 months ago.
Oh no.
Uh, yeah, one of the young people that was involved with a band, Pigeon Collision, that we were working with, and it really, I tell you, but it stopped everyone in their tracks, and everybody started talking and communicating and posting things about mental health, and a lot more communication has happened because of it. And I think a lot of people realize that, you know, that there is a way out. It doesn't have to end like that.
Right.
And Yeah.
Well, I mean, Artie, you have from, I mean, even earlier than 19, but officially from 19 on, you've always had a heart for people. You've always had a heart for, you know, you know, I mean, what you don't hear many 19-year-olds that are concerned about the homeless population and help trying to help them get a leg up and get away from the situation that they're in, but all the way through till now, you're helping the youth, yeah, from Shepherd's Flock to Camp Shannon to Rugrat Records to Synergy. You are always trying to find ways to help improve people's lives, and I think that is something that we really need more of, especially in this day and age. More people that are willing to, instead of concerning themselves with only climbing up the ladder themselves, looking down and putting their hand down to try to help people up on theirs as well. And a lot of people will appreciate that, and so really quick, do you have any of the stuff for Synergy or Rugrat Records online? Like, do you guys have any like social
Yeah.
presence?
So, for Synergy Senior Fitness, if anyone is listening to this and wants help for their mom, their grandma, their aunt, their uncle, or themselves, if they're over 65, this is specific exercises designed for the very specific needs of the senior, including balance, which is a big issue. So, synergyseniorfitness.com. They could go on that website, and I'm there. I also have presence on Facebook. Synergy Senior Fitness.
Right on.
So that's there. And then the for the music, for if anyone wants to check out some of the bands that we're working with and this music community that we're working with young adults, it's rugratrecords.com, and also Rugrat Records is on Facebook as well.
We'll definitely
So
be checking that out.
so yeah,
So, Artie, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview and for just to chat with me for a little bit. It was really always fun to be able to catch up with old friends, and obviously want to be able to continue to do this. To keep up with you. Need to. One of the things that I'm trying to do myself is to stay in contact with people more. Instead of just
yeah,
we get stuck in this world of just scroll, 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 scroll,
yeah, yeah,
and not interacting. And I'm a big person that likes to, obviously I like to talk. So
yeah, yeah,
we'll continue to stay in contact. And again,
yeah.
everyone that's listening, I will make sure that I've probably already added in the links and everything to the description, not only on Adzuki.com, but also on the YouTube video. And again, if you guys want to check out the things that Artie's involved in with Synergy or the Rugrat Records, you guys will be able to see those links there. And again, thank you again, Artie, for taking some time with us today. And we will.
I enjoyed this, Ben.
Oh, absolutely. And everyone else, we have a couple of other interviews that we have lined up. That's one thing I do want to say, Artie, is I'm fascinated by Liana's new career path, and I need to get you to get me in contact with her because I think that will be a fascinating story as well. Because I remember when
Yeah,
she was, itty bitty. I remember when she was, I mean, and again, when I first went there, I was itty bitty, but she was itty bittier. Uh, and
yeah,
and I think that would be that's something that we'll talk about once we're done recording, because I think that would be a really fascinating story, and also
right.
talking to your son as well, with the Ned and all the other bands, from
Yeah,
from one drummer to another. That I think that would be a good one as well. But everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the People I Like podcast. You guys will be able to find our. I'm gonna try to do this once a week. There may be some weeks here and there. We are in the process of trying to sell our house so that we can move. So there may be some days where we have some episodes that are missing, but we will make sure that we do this on a regular basis. I have several other people that I have lined up for this show. Whether you may have heard of them before. Again, I have confirmed that I will have Kristen Booth from Signed, Sealed, Delivered. She's also on Orphan Black, a couple of other shows. We'll have Crystal Lowe. She is also another actress from Signed, Sealed, Delivered, but she has been in several other movies as well. We'll go ahead and have her on as well. Those have been confirmed. And just a couple of other a couple of other musicians as well that I have scheduled. So be on the lookout for that. You can always find us on adzuki.com as well as facebook.com slash. I haven't created People I Like for Facebook, but we'll go ahead and get that created probably this week as well. So anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk to you on the next episode of People I Like podcast. I will see you guys later. I am Kenny from adzuki.com. Talk to you guys later.